Hello, all my duckies out there. I'm Duuz-Diz-Din coming at you with another DuckTales 2017 episode review. This time it's season two's episode 15 titled The Dangerous Chemistry of Gandra D. And the cover art that you're kind of seeing right now is actually done by the episode director Jason Zurich. Um, he really went through and promoted this episode out the ringer because I saw this promotional art piece like months ahead of when this was finally launched. So that just shows how into this episode he really was, which just goes to show you that the actual people who work on this series are all DuckTales fans. And that's the best way you can do it. If you're going to remake something, get fans to do it, true fans who actually appreciate the source material. Now, getting into the episode proper, we actually open up with the villain as Adam's Dr. Adam's fear. Which is just a weather pun. And he's a weather-based villain that actually looks a lot like Dr. Doofenshmirtz. And he's voiced by Tom Kenny and everything. But, he's just this weather-based villain. And we even get a look into Gizmo Duck's, background for the most part, where he says that he's, Adams is actually the third weather-based villain that Gizmo has fought this week. So Gizmo's actually getting a little bit worn out. But he does manage to take out the Doctor quick, fast, and in a hurry so that he can go and meet up with Huey and Webby, with Webby almost immediately realizing that Fenton is in fact Gizmo Duck with a few clues. But we come to find that Gizmo has, Fenton has a lot of people who already know, including Gyro, Launchpad, Dewey, Huey, not Louie, Mark Beaks, Scrooge, his mailman, his dry cleaner, which I'm just like, dude, what are you doing? The barista at Starducks, everyone who lives on his block, which, like, seriously, he lives with his mom, and it's not like he's got a secret lair or anything. And now, Webby. But Fenton actually wants to use today to actually work on projects of his own and not so much focus on being Gizmo Duck. However, with all the news reports of his constant heroics, that's a little bit easier said than done. As Huey explains to Webby that for once, Fenton wants to actually be recognized as the scientist that he wants to become rather than just a superhero. It's the Spider-Man conundrum. With great power comes great responsibility, but at the same time, this murder on your social life. Speaking of which, we end up being introduced to the new rebooted character of Gandra D, who is also a scientist in this continuity, and a self-made one, which she takes great pride in not being a sellout, as she kind of sees Fenton to be for the most part. Gandra D, back in the original continuity, was this, big, tall, blonde shell babe, kind of, blonde bombshell babe. And, while she wasn't dumb by any means, she was actually very sweet and helpful and all that good stuff. We could see here they've gone for more of a punk rocker-esque kind of rebel scientist look. And she immediately seems to take an interest in Fenton and what he calls his own personal project that will revolutionize the world. And Gandra is more than interested in it and hopes to actually meet up with Fenton to see his various inventions. Huey sees this as a kind of meet-cute situation, where he finds that they must be flirting and she's potentially asking to go on a date with him. And so Fenton actually, decides that they'll meet up, though he doesn't define it too much like a date for the most part. But he's just happy to have a meeting of the minds and someone who will take him seriously. Although he kind of plays it off like he's in charge of the labs, whereas Gyro is actually in charge of McDuck Labs and all that good stuff. So Fenton goes back to his place for a meeting powwow with Webby and Huey, where they kind of go over what Fenton should do in order to impress Gandra, with Fenton's mom even busting in and giving him some kind of sweet motherly advice, which is basically just don't be yourself. And she even gives him his dad's old suit in order for Fenton to, make a good first impression. So Fenton ends up being dropped off by Launchpad to pick up Gandra, and once they get her, Fenton kind of tries to make it clear that he doesn't want to force this into being a date. He just wants this to be a scientific little get together, while Gandra isn't quite opposed to it being a date. But once they reach the lab, Huey and Webby have set it up into a romantic rendezvous kind of situation, with Gandra just wondering how they get any work done with all the romantic atmosphere around. But when Fenton kind of questions how they were able to do this and where Gyro is, we actually come to find out that they've actually sealed Gyro in the broom closet. But he pulls the two aside and tells them that, all this fancy smanchy lovey-dovey stuff isn't really what Gandra seems to be going for. It's supposed to be a meeting of the minds, respected peers going over their various inventions, which, just shows how much he at least is trying to respect Gandra as a person who's at least taking the time to, look into his own inventions so they could bounce ideas off of each other. That's how scientific breakthroughs are made, when you bounce ideas off of a fellow scientist in order to create the best possible outcome. Unfortunately, as they're off talking, we come to find that Gandra is talking to a friend of her own, friend in various quotation marks, who is none other than Mark Beeks. Yes, Gandra is in fact a spy, which a lot of people called from the very get-go, but when, the director is putting out artwork like he did, it's pretty obvious that something is, pretty down with Gandra, especially considering the title, too, The Dangerous Chemistry of Gandra D. Like, come on. They weren't being subtle about it for the most part. But Mark is actually being very, very impatient, as he needs the catchphrase of Blathering Blatherskite to activate the stolen gizmo technology that he's obtained and using in conjunction with some of Gandra's own tech. However, Gyro actually overhears this, but Gandra just shocks him and knocks him out to keep him quiet. But Fenton, manages to convince Huey and Webby to kind of tone things down, as Gandra is still just doing her best to get Mark to settle down, but he just continues to consume a lot of her nanobot liquid, despite the fact that he should only need one, as he's gotten very impatient. But as the night goes on, Fenton and Gandra actually start to make a bit of a connection in the fact that they're both kind of outcast scientists for the most part, called crackpots and all that good stuff, as Mark continues to down all these vials of nanobot serum. And as they show off their various inventions, Fenton with his, spray that makes things taste like glazed donuts, Gandra with her, I guess they're contact lenses that act as cameras, which, various forms of media have actually been implementing more and more lately. And even this kind of super dissolving liquid that can only be held in diamond encased containers. Although this, along with a gold magnet, actually kind of makes Gandra, it shows her apathy towards the rich billionaires who she feels, end up just profiteering off of hardworking scientists. It makes me wonder if she has something in her past that that causes her to have this animosity towards the, rich 1%. But I don't know if that's just her being more of an active kind of liberal personality, or because she has something specific that she causes her to have a gripe against the billionaire class. But it's an interesting point of view in terms of, Gandra. She's very much very outspoken about her beliefs and how she feels, but she's a scientist first and foremost, because the old Gandra was also a peer of Fenton, and they worked together in a good environment. But this takes things to a more interesting level in the fact that they're both inventors and they can help each other later down the line, and it creates that connection for the Gizmo Duck suit. And Gandra even shows off this nanotech that she has on her palm that allows her to turn her own bodily energy into this super electric charge. And on Mark Beeks' side, he's finally gotten fed up with waiting and actually goes in to infiltrate the lab, managing to not only dodge the defense system but hack it as well in order to get it to help him get into the laboratory. Fenton shows Gandra this kind of this unstable project he's been working on that actually has a frictionless object that can basically create this, ever ongoing energy. It'll just repeatedly keep going no matter what. It's just that it's unstable. And seeing this, Gandra actually finds herself very impressed by Fenton's work, not to mention his philosophy on how to make things, as he doesn't do it simply for profit, he also just does it for the love of inventing. And that creates yet another true deep connection between the two. And they ultimately decide to actually have that dinner. So, there were steps that Huey and Webby were kind of missing before they could get to that romantic rendezvous. And Huey is all too happy to get the romantic evening up and running, as he wants to get a Lady and the Tramp moment going where they eat spaghetti and have it meet in the middle. So as he gives a very beautiful little song going, Webby goes to tie their pasta together so they'll meet Lady and the Tramp style. But she notices a message on Gandra's phone from Mark Beeks, and she puts two and two together to realize that they're working together in order to get the passcode Blathering Blatherskite, because it has to be said by Fenton Crackshell Cabrera. And Webby passes this on to Huey, and they end up pulling Fenton aside to tell him, although Fenton is completely smitten at this point with Gandra, they have to be the bearers of bad news. And while Gandra does her best to kind of continue to keep up the charade, whatever, she actually kind of suggests that she wouldn't mind a second date or anything like that, showing that she's actually kind of gotten caught up in the moment. But Fenton just tells her to drop the act, as he knows what she's truly after. And he even goes on and while Gandra actually tries to downplay the whole situation, Fenton says the passcode that she's so after, in order to summon his suit, knowing that she already knows his secret identity, in order to find out exactly what she wants to use it for, only for Mark Beeks to pop in, downing another vial of the nano liquid and showing off the gizmo tech that he's using in order to activate the nano liquid, and as well as the voice line he has, all in conjunction to give him the power that he needs in order to overtake the popularity that Gizmo continues to have within Duckburg. However, it starts to kind of hurt him a little bit to a certain degree, and Gandra tells him that he was only supposed to take one vial, not all the vials. But we see the results of this causes Mark Beeks to become, this super Mark, this mega Mark Beeks, as kind of more like a Bane-like kind of character with the serum as well as the devices on him. And he ends up going toe-to-toe with Gizmo, and Gizmo is no match for the newly hulked out Mark Beeks. And they start to kind of tear apart the lab for the most part. And Gizmo even has to go in and try to save Huey and Webby. But once the fight, gets to a point where Gizmo has had enough and he wants to take out Mark once and for all, Gandra comes from behind and shocks him with her, electric nanomachine glove, hand, whatever. And Gizmo is incapacitated from that shock, not to, on top of the beating he got from Mark. And Mark kidnaps the kids in order to use them as leverage, as hostages to keep Fenton from coming after him. And as Gandra goes in order to leave, Fenton really just rakes her across the coals, and it's just like, how could you? I thought you were freelance. I thought you were all about working for yourself. And while Gandra does admit that she was ultimately feels that her thing was only just simply using Mark Beeks, she does actually say that she did admire Fenton as a fellow scientist, although Fenton only sees Gandra as a crook at this point. And with his Gizmo Duck suit completely demolished at this point, Fenton has no choice but to turn to his frictionless, invention in order to go after Mark, who has climbed to the top of Wattle Tower, all King Kong style. But he's confronted by Fenton, who goes on the offensive, basically, using his, little invention as a bit of a, ping pong for the most part, smacking it into Mark. And while Mark is distracted, suddenly in comes Gandra to help out, as she wasn't really down with the whole idea of him kidnapping kids. However, Gandra says that she's unable to really do any solid damage because Mark's hide has become too tough from the nanomachines. And this gives Fenton the idea that while his hide might be tough, his insides are still weak. So they end up using, Mark's love of technology, as he did all this for a publicity stunt for the most part, and in order to distract him with the phone news report of his rampage. However, Mark finds he's unable to use technology because of his massive size, which, that's his kryptonite in the end. It's just like, no, I can't use technology. No. And, Gandra and Fenton use this opportunity to supercharge Fenton's invention, while Fenton spikes it right into Mark Beeks' gullet, completely frying him from the inside out, destroying all the nanomachines as well as the Gizmo technology, causing Mark to revert to his usual scrawny self. However, Huey and Webby are still kind of trapped at the top of the Wattle Tower. And Fenton then also notices that Gandra has run off, but she has actually helped, create this equation in order to have Fenton, cause his unstable creation to become fully stable. And, he immediately goes back to the lab in order to test it out, for the most part satisfied with his encounter with Gandra. And when, Gyro comes in to question Fenton about why he's not out doing his usual world saving, Fenton says that he has real work to do, the work that he so cares about, inventing, showing that his, creation has actually managed to, be the basis for an almost infinite power system for the most part, much to the delight of Gyro, showing his first true sign of approval for Fenton and his work. However, he's none too pleased with the work that Fenton also did in destroying his lab, thus bringing our reintroduction to Gandra D to a close. And it was a fun reintroduction. Well done to the team as a whole of Jason Zirkin directing, and, not to mention the few storyboards he did. I know there was a whole team behind that, but the primary players and all of that, as well as the writer Christina Megalas, I think it's Megalas, in just really crafting a good reintroduction of this character. It's solid, good stuff time and time again, and I really appreciate the hard work and effort that I see in each and every episode. It was just really fun to see Gizmo Duck in full swing, but also to have Fenton really do his own thing and show off what he's made of. But that's the end of this episode review. Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the new interpretation of Gandra D? And do you hope that she, like in the original series, will become the full-time girlfriend of Fenton, or do you hope to see a little bit more of the will they, won't they, well into the third season? And how did you feel about Mark Beeks in this episode? He's just such a fun character to hate. Not to mention there was it's a date song in the background throughout all of this in various forms, like an EDM version and a regular kind of smooth R&B version that was just hilariously played in a lot of places. How do you feel about that as well? And if you like this video, feel free to leave me a like. If you didn't, give me a dislike and tell me what I did wrong in the comment section below, and subscribe and hit the bell icon. That way you never miss out on another DuckTales 2017 episode review. And if you want to find me on social media, just Google Duuz-Diz-Din. I am everywhere, for better or for worse. And until the next video, just remember that even though you might say it's not a date, it just might be a date. It's a chemical reaction, baby. Until the next time. Bye-bye.